Were you or your family victims of direct acts of violence?
Open your eyes. The Soviet Union is crumbling.
We can just leave. This is at home.
Is it?
Some men came by yesterday evening asking for the names of all the Armenian children.
Did you call the police?
Police don't care what happened to us.
The world is changing all around you, yet you fail to see it.
Welcome to Shalom World TV's Beyond the Vision, a show that features faith-based film and television. I'm your host, Joelle Maryn, and today we're going behind the scenes of the new film, Between Borders. This incredible film reminds us of the importance of basic human rights and how welcoming the U.S. is to many cultures and backgrounds.
Armenian Christians might be one of the most persecuted Christian groups in the world, essentially for the last 2,000 years.
We are blessed to be joined by the director, Mark Freiburger. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I actually just got to see the film today. And so it's fresh in my mind and my heart. And I'm so excited, that we were able to set this interview up. I would love for you to share with our viewers what this movie is about and what led you to make it.
Yeah, this film is it's set in the 1980s. It's based on a true story. And it's about the Petrosian family, which are Armenian family who were living in Azerbaijan during that time period of the Soviet Union. A lot of Armenians from Armenia were living as ethnic Armenians in Azerbaijan. But there is a long-standing conflict that has been going on between those two countries. And they had a really bad flare-up in the late 80s, which ended in some ethnic cleansing of Armenians in Azerbaijan, some pogroms. And the family in our story, whose life story this film is based on, were targeted for murder, and they were able to escape the city of Baku, Azerbaijan, where they're living at the time, and eventually found refugee status in Russia. But once they got to Russia, they experienced even more racism and a whole other slew of problems. And during their time in Russia, they met some American missionaries who introduced them to Christ, and then ultimately the idea of possibly trying to fight for asylum in the U.S. And so this film chronicles their story over a period of a few years.
Yeah, and so it is based on a true story. I love movies that are about true stories. Is it exact? Were there any places that you had to kind of veer off a little?
Yeah, it's very close, actually, very close. I did a lot of research, and interviews with the family, research of the period to see what else was going on. And I would say probably the biggest sort of creative license, if you want to call it that we took, was the time that this whole story takes place in, even the portion in the United States where they have their courtroom trial. It really took place over many more years, but we had to kind of truncate it down, and everything you're actually seeing on screen and a lot of even the things that are being said are pretty verbatim.
Yeah, and I mean that was like you said, a long thing for them to go to court to actually eventually be able to stay in the U.S. and get asylum and have some relief from everything they were suffering. But yeah, for the sake of movie, it has to be truncated. But I have to say, I really think the story that was told and the way it was written, I believe you were a co-writer as well, they really got to tell their story, in the years of suffering and things that they went through. How did you find out about this film? Or actually you were one of the writers. So what led you to get involved in it?
So one of the producers of the film had approached me to essentially write the script, to rewrite the script and kind of, help them get it to where they wanted it to be. And this producer grew up in Russia and has known the family for 20, 30 years. And so for the last 20 years, they've been saying, someday we want to turn your story into a film. And it's been really just kind of percolating over the years and developing. And they finally got a script together. And then they were looking for someone to kind of help them take the script to the next level. And then they ended up hiring me. And then through that process of getting to know the family and learning this world and the plight of Armenian Christians around the world, I really started feeling very attached to this story. And so I asked them if I could direct it. And fortunately, they said yes. And then thus began the next stage of the process. And then, off to the races from there, making the film.
Yeah, and you mentioned they're Armenian Christians, and they have faced so much persecution. It's often overlooked, even what Armenians have gone through by the international community. Can you share with us, how far this film goes to relay their suffering?
Yeah. So what a lot of people will find if they don't know and they see this film is that, and even some of the additional research I did and learned while making this film is that Armenian Christians might be one of the most persecuted Christian groups in the world, essentially for the last 2,000 years, surrounded by nations that were hostile to them and constantly being overtaken by empires over the centuries. What's also sort of beautiful about the Armenian nation is that they're the first country to officially adapt Christianity as the national religion. So a lot of people probably around the world don't realize that Armenian Christians are probably one of the most persecuted Christian groups on the planet, and it has been that way for almost 2,000 years. And so even though this film just focuses on the 1980s and 1990s, it's a snapshot of what a lot of Armenians go through around the world, especially in that region of the world. And hopefully this film will shed a little bit of light on it. I think I've been told by some Armenian groups that this might be the first major film to be made about Armenians made by non-Armenians. Hopefully this movie will open up to tell many more of their stories.
The Soviet Union is crumbling.
We can just leave. This is at home.
Is it?
Some men came by yesterday evening asking for the names of all the Armenian children.
Did you call the police?
Police don't care what happened to us.
So we get this to the big screen. We get to see this beautiful finished product. We know it was not a cakewalk to get there. Could you share with us any challenges that you faced in bringing the story alive on the big screen?
Absolutely. Well, it's not a film if there weren't challenges, and this one had so many. But I would say one of the most basic and obvious challenges were that it was a very small budget. And we had, we had to make a period piece on a very tight budget, and we only had 20 days to shoot the film and only 3 weeks to prep it. So
20 days! Wow.
Yeah, and it was a lightning pace with the most meticulous kind of planning you could imagine to be able to pull it off. I didn't sleep for weeks, and it was coming right off of having our second child being born, so I wasn't sleeping anyway. So it was already it was a tough production all around because we just tried to fit in so much in such a short period of time.
Where did you film the period pieces?
The movie takes place in Azerbaijan, Russia, and the United States. Three locations, but we shot it all in Romania. We needed to find a country that had the look of all three. So for the scenes in Azerbaijan, we shot down in a city called Constanza, down by the Black Sea, kind of near the border of Ukraine. And then we shot all the scenes that take place in Russia in the capital of Bucharest. And then for all the scenes set in the US, it was just interior, so we built a set.
Yeah, it's amazing because you would never know. Everything does look like it belongs where it is and that you're in that city. So that's a good location scout behind the scenes working for you. Yeah. There's a scene in the movie where Violetta, one of the main characters, she speaks to the court, about what she found special about Christianity and the change she even witnessed in her mother because they were communists before. But, prior to her encounter with Christianity, she hated it because she didn't even know what it thought, just hated it without even knowing. Do you think there's many people in the United States and even abroad who just hate what they think Christianity may be, but would 100% fall in love with it if they just only knew?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say, starting with Violetta in particular, it's not that she hated it. She was growing up in Azerbaijan during a time where it was controlled by the Soviet Union, right? So the Soviet Union worked overtime to really stamp out all religion within the countries that were part of the Union. And so religion just wasn't really thought of as much. I mean, Azerbaijan was mostly Muslim at the time. And there were some practicing Christian Armenians, but a lot of it's kind of atheism was running pretty rampant then. And her grandparents were Armenian Christians, but it just didn't, once the Soviet Union took over that region of the world, religion wasn't a thing anymore. And but ironically, it wasn't until they moved to Russia and met American missionaries in Russia that they really found and embraced Christianity.
Yeah. And are you hoping some of her conversion, she says like before she just kind of did what she grew up in, and now she has a choice and she has chosen to become Christian. Are you hoping that the film inspires others to figure out, well, did they just grow up in something and not really explore this, and if they should make a change?
I hope so. Yeah. And what's interesting about them and especially about the people that don't live in the United States and other areas of the world is that, they really did have to make a choice because it was not a popular thing to become a Christian. I think we're pretty insulated here in the United States and lucky to choose what we want to follow, and many countries, obviously, as you know, today, same as back then, if you choose to become a Christian, that's a very specific choice. And you really have to want it, and I hope that people who do see this film, also embrace the film's message of loving your neighbor. To me, that's kind of the core message of the film. I know that the film touches on some current hot button issues, but really at the end of the day, it's about not necessarily a film about asylum, but a film about loving your neighbor.
Yeah, well, like you said, there's a lot of hot button issues. We have, like you said, religious persecution. We have asylum, racism, just judgment, right? And, just not even having basic human rights that we should all have, like peace of mind and being able to just have regular freedom of walking down the street.
The difference between who I was and who I am now is that I finally made a choice. I was born into communism. I was born an Armenian in Azerbaijan, and both my country and communism failed me. They left my people to die in the streets. They left us without a chance to better our lives. I did not have a choice what I was born into. But I chose Jesus.
There's so many great scenes in this movie that just leave a lasting impression on you. And there's, two of my favorites is when Ivan confronts the group of the Russians in the bus, and he's got his, what was it, a hammer?
A hammer.
Or something. He's like, well, yeah. He's like, well, I'm ready. And then there's another one when Violetta, the wife, she goes to this job interview and they make her say horrible things about herself. Like they gave her the job, but only like if she admitted how low she was and degraded her. And she really needed a job. It was just so impacting and sad to see like what she had to suffer through to help provide for her children and family. The choice of the actors, I loved, who you chose as this couple. Can you tell us how were they cast in this? And what was your favorite scene from the film?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are actually two of my favorite scenes. So I love that you called those out. And I mean, especially that scene that you described with Violetta in the job interview in the Russian school, I mean, that happened verbatim. I mean, she still to this day, she was on set that day while we were filming and she was watching the scene being filmed and crying, remembering how it felt and how humiliating it was that day when she had to, recite those words. And even in real life, we actually even toned it back a little bit because in real life, they made her get on the floor and they made her recite the words from the floor. I mean, it was awful. And but as you see in that scene, it's so moving. And Elizabeth Tabish, who played Violetta, is unbelievable. Obviously, everybody who watches your show, yeah, she was lovely. Also another Austinite. She's a wonderful, wonderful person to work with. My favorite actress I've ever worked with. And obviously your audience knows her from The Chosen. Yeah. And she's wonderful in that. And we had no other backup. We said from the beginning when we were writing it, I called the producer and I said, what do you think about Elizabeth Tabish? As I was writing it, I said, what do you think about Elizabeth in the lead role? And he was like, that's our first choice too. So, as soon as we had draft of the script that we were comfortable to send her, we did. And fortunately, she came on board. And then we had, for the Ivan character, we had auditions, more traditional. And we had 7,000 submissions, 7,000 men auditioning or submitting themselves for that part. It was insane.
How do you pick? So this is a great behind the scenes question as well, because I was just in LA for something else, and there's so much talent, everybody's gorgeous, and again, it's like, how do you know, with all that talent and all those numbers of people who are striving for the same thing, how do you pick? And then to find, the right look, the right tone, the right heart,
It's hard. It's really hard. And your heart breaks for so many actors who are wonderfully talented and you but you end up going with this other actor because they're just slightly more what you were looking for. And, but to narrow it down, the first step is through the casting director in their office, and they kind of boil it down. By the time I see it, I see like the final 200. And okay. I'm the kind of director that will. It's still 200, yes, but I'm a little bit when it comes to working with actors and casting. It's like my hyper focus. So I watch all 200 auditions, and then essentially tell the casting director like these 10 or these 20 I want to see in person, and do like a callback. These days it's mostly Skype, or Zoom, and we narrowed it down, and it came down to two actors, one who was Armenian and one who Patrick Sabangi, who played the role. And so we decided they were both wonderful, and we decided to kind of to respect the fact that this is an Armenian story. We approached the Armenian actor first and said, hey, it's really down to you and another guy, but given your heritage and the fact that this actor had also lived in Azerbaijan during that time as a child, I said, would you like to play the role? And he gave a very careful consideration, but ultimately chose not to, because he had never done a faith-based film before, and just really felt like, even though he liked the script, he just said, I've never done a faith film before. It kind of scares me, and I'm not, I don't think I'm quite ready yet to do something like that. So we said, okay, we understand. And that often happens in Hollywood. You make an offer to an actor, and they may like the material on the story, but I get a little scared, when it's time to do a story of faith. So we then approached our other front runner, Patrick, and fortunately he was all in, and he was amazing. And he was so good as you saw the film, he's so good with the kids in the movie, playing this father. He has two kids of his own, and it just leaned into that role so well. I even jokingly said to our casting director at the beginning, I said, I kind of want like a young Tony Shalhoub for this role. And he literally, people tell him all the time, oh, you look like Tony Shalhoub, like a young Tony Shalhoub. So
that's great. So
it worked out. Yeah. But he was wonderful to work with too. They had such great chemistry, the two of them.
Yeah. And I feel like, things just like when God closes a door, another one opens. And at the end of the day, what's meant for you won't pass you by. And so that person
Absolutely.
was the right one. So I'm the opposite. I turned an audition down today because it wasn't faith-based. Guess it can go. Yeah. It can go either way, but I feel like, but
everybody has their guide rails, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight, Mark. We need to figure out how can our viewers watch Between Borders.
Yes. Well, if by the time this airs, if it's already out in theaters, it will be in theaters end of January, all across the United States. But if by the time this airs, it's out of theaters, it will also be available on the Angel Studios app and then Amazon Prime. I believe Amazon Prime starts in March, and Angel Studios app will be the first place they can watch it streaming.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It was just a blessing to get here and learn more about you and this beautiful film. And we pray that everybody runs out and sees it, whether it's going to be live in the theaters, that's our number one choice, or definitely on the streaming apps, and go out and watch it.
Thank you so much.
Were you or your family victims of direct acts of violence?
Open your eyes. The Soviet Union is crumbling.
We can't just leave. This is at home.
Is it?
Some men came by yesterday evening asking for the names of all the Armenian children.
Did you call the police?
Police don't care what happened to us.
And the world is changing all around you. Yet you failed to see it.
Communism failed me. They left my people to die in the streets.
A life lived without constant fear should be the most basic human right.
Why are you so nice to us? Jesus was a refugee too.
I was born into communism. I did not have a choice what I was born into, but I chose Jesus, and I choose this country.
For all of you watching, Between Borders is a wonderful film that reminds us of the importance of living in peace and having religious freedom. I can't wait for you to see it, and I hope to see you again real soon. God be with you. Shalom.